And then a moment for my notes to come back again. Okay, so what I'm going to cover today then, I will talk about recognizing imposter syndrome, and that is recognizing it in yourself and indeed in others, because you'll also recognize this maybe in your friends and in your colleagues as well, especially, as we talk about it and we talk about the symptoms and stuff, then you might see it in other people as well. I'll talk about the possible consequences of experiencing imposter syndrome, and it is possible consequences because, of course, it's never exactly the same for everyone. So it's not going to be consequences that will affect everyone. I'll spend most of the time on tips for managing your imposter syndrome, and we'll finish off with a few sample interview questions on confidence. As I said, not on imposter syndrome itself, but on confidence. So I was going to start with some statistics on imposter syndrome, but the more that I researched it, the more it seems that practically everyone experiences it at some time or other. So I thought that I'd go with this picture instead. It's just sort of a funny cartoon, really, just to indicate that if you feel that you do experience imposter syndrome, then you're very much not alone. And just to further emphasize the fact that so many people experience imposter syndrome, I thought I'd show you a selection of celebrities that have been recorded as stating that they experience imposter syndrome. And you'll recognize a lot of the faces, I'm sure. Maybe some you don't recognize, but we have Kate Winslet, and she basically said that, you have this inner belief that you're inadequate, mediocre, and let me just read for you what she had been saying. I'm rubbish and everyone is going to see it. They've cast the wrong person. Which, Kate Winslet is a big star, obviously. Then we have Natalie Portman and Emma Watson said, it's almost like the better I do, the more my feeling of inadequacy actually increases. Because I'm just going, any moment, someone's going to find out I'm a total fraud and that I don't deserve any of what I've achieved. And we have Meryl Streep there and Tom Hanks, both people that you would think have done enough in their chosen career to be very secure in their abilities. But both of them having talked about experiencing imposter syndrome as well, with Meryl Streep saying, you think, why would anyone want to see me again in a movie? And I don't know how to act anyway, so why am I doing this? I think that's quite extraordinary coming from Meryl Streep. And Tom Hanks saying, no matter what we've done, there comes a point where you think, how did I get here? When are they going to discover that I am in fact a fraud and take everything away from me? And then we also have figures there from the world of sports and literature, like tennis player Serena Williams and Maya Angelou. And the Maya Angelou, who's obviously the civil rights activist, an author and a poet, and a Nobel laureate. And she admitted that at times she felt like a fraud, that word coming up there again. She said, I've written 11 books, but each time I think, uh-oh, they're going to find me out now. I've run a game on everybody and they're going to find me out. So again, I think quite, extraordinary coming from people like that. And there are also quotes from people like Paul McCartney and even Albert Einstein, who's reported to have said, um, the exaggerated esteem in which my life work is held makes me very ill at ease. I feel compelled to think of myself as an involuntary swindler. And I think from the involuntary swindler bit, you could also take that word fraud, fairly interchangeable there. So, this quotation is from a well publicised talk at a girls' school in South London, someone who did a talk in South London in December 2018. If anybody has any thoughts on who it might be from, please pop it into the chat. I'm sort of going this way today rather than asking any particularly personal questions because it's a very personal subject. So, anybody have any thoughts on who that quote might be from? It was a talk in a girls' school in South London in December 2018. I still have a little imposter syndrome. It doesn't go away. That feeling that you shouldn't take me seriously. What do I know? I share that with you because we all have doubts in our abilities, about our power, and what that power is. So, anybody have any thoughts on who it might be? I can't see the chat, Carmel. So, if anything does come in, do let me know, will you?
No responses yet.
No responses. You want to take a guess, Carmel?
Maybe like a political figure, Rushy.
Somewhat, yeah. Ah, there you go, Reese. Yeah, Heather. So you see, I knew that people would know this. I knew people would know that one, and I'm trusting that you didn't Google it. But quite frankly, I don't care whether you did or not. You got it. It doesn't matter. Michelle Obama. And again, someone who is extremely well educated, extremely accomplished, and I think most of us would consider to be extremely confident. So when she's saying that she still has imposter syndrome, I think that gives us all a little bit of encouragement that, if we're experiencing it, then it's okay because look at all these top names as well. And obviously, I've put up there celebrities that I'm hoping that you will recognize quite a few people there. But, people from the world of business and industry and everything will be in exactly the same sort of position as well. Okay, and I think I'm going to go with the phrase experiences imposter syndrome because I think it's very important that you don't see it as an illness. Okay, imposter syndrome is the overwhelming feeling that you are undeserving and unworthy of your success. You feel less intelligent, capable, or talented than you actually are. You believe that your accomplishments are a result of luck or coincidence, and you are afraid that you will be exposed as a fraud. And certainly, whenever I talked about the celebrities there, you would see that word fraud coming up all the time. And that feeling of being caught out, being found out basically as not being as good as other people think that you are. So, even if you hadn't heard of what imposter syndrome was, you'd recognize those feelings, whether from yourself or even in your discussions with other people as well. And as I said, that word fraud comes up a lot, and that feeling of being exposed or being worried about going to be exposed. And again, as I said, when I'm talking about imposter syndrome, I'm talking about experiencing it. And I do see quite frequently people talking about suffering from imposter syndrome. And that kind of makes you think that it's an illness, and it's very much not. It's an emotion. It maybe is experienced for, quite extensively and for quite a long time, but it's not an illness. And even though we talk about maybe symptoms of it, and again, that makes it sound like an illness, it's not. It's experiencing it. So I will try my best to refer to it as experiencing imposter syndrome. And I think you should start to think about it that way as well, not to think about it in terms of it being an illness. So we don't suffer from it, we experience it. So perhaps if you have experienced imposter syndrome, and that writing's quite small, but you will get these slides at the end of it as well. Without having put a label on it, you might have experienced it as perhaps a lack of confidence. You mightn't have said to yourself, "Oh, I have imposter syndrome." You might just feel that that you're particularly shy or you lack confidence. Okay, but I think that with things like this specifically, it's really good to put a name on it, to put a label on it essentially, because I think that whenever you do that, whenever you've labeled it, it makes it easier to deal with. It makes it easier to actually say, this is what it is, and this is what I'm going to do about it. So, some things to think about to help you decide if you have experienced imposter syndrome. Do you secretly worry that others will find out that you're not as bright and capable as they think you are? Perhaps when you have to speak up about something or when you have taken on a new role. Do you sometimes shy away from challenges or opportunities because of nagging self doubt? And that's specifically one of the reasons that I did this session because, we hear from students who are reluctant to apply for placements, for example, or jobs because they think that they're not good enough for it. And that's clearly not the case, obviously. Do you tend to chalk up your accomplishments to it being a fluke or no big deal, or maybe even the fact that people just like you? That's why you succeed. Actually, if you can get people to just like you, I think that's an achievement in itself. Um, Doing that means that you're not giving yourself credit for all the hard work that you put into your accomplishments. It's not the case that anyone could have done it because everyone doesn't do it, so don't dismiss the achievements that you have just by saying, oh, anyone could have done that. That's no big deal. And you do hear a lot of people, especially if you try to give someone a compliment, you'll see them sort of pushing it back at you. And it's not necessarily to be nasty about it or anything, but it's just that people actually have difficulty accepting the achievements that they have and recognizing that for themselves. So make sure that you give yourself credit for the achievements that you do have. Do you hate making a mistake? To be fair, most people do. Being less than fully prepared or not doing things perfectly. And then, similarly to that, do you tend to feel crushed by even constructive criticism, seeing it as evidence of your ineptness? And I think that those two are about you feeling that what you have achieved is not good enough and always having to do better. Okay. And obviously, I'm not trying to stop people making improvements and developing, but it is about acknowledging the achievements that you already have and working from there. Not doing it from a place of not feeling good enough. Okay, so it's different to sort of want to improve things because you know that you can achieve more as opposed to wanting to improve things because you're just not good enough. Okay. Um, Again, then the next one, when you do succeed, do you think I fooled them this time, but I may not be so lucky next time? And that's one that was demonstrated very clearly with the celebrities and the sort of things that they were saying. Do you believe that other people are smarter and more capable than you are? And, let's face it, some people are. But again, it is about acknowledging that you have learned plenty, that you've achieved plenty, and like everyone else, you still have things to learn. So it is about having that sort of growth mindset towards improving and accepting your genuine and not imagined limitations. And that's important, because we do have to recognize that we have limitations, but we have to be, I suppose, honest with ourselves about what those limitations are. And confidence is about feeling that you will be able to cope with the situation even if you're not you're not the one with the most knowledge or the most experience about it. You've enough confidence to use the resources that are available to you, because we all have to keep trying new things, and we have to have enough confidence that when we do that, we will be able to achieve it. Or indeed, if we don't achieve it, that we can be resourceful enough to work around that. And then the final one there, do you live in fear of being found out, discovered, or unmasked? And those are all from Dr. Valerie Young, who's one of the sort of foremost people in the research around imposter syndrome. And again, that one about being found out or unmasked came across very strongly in the celebrity comments. And I think this is going to happen most often, maybe whenever you try new things, take on a new role, maybe do a presentation that you haven't done before, start a new type of job or a job in a different place. And I was thinking about this in terms of, veteran actors like Meryl Streep and Tom Hanks, and why on earth they would still feel like this whenever, we see them as being such big high achievers. Um, but I suppose, when you think about it in terms of acting, that each time they're acting, it's a completely new role that they're taking on and a new learning process each time. And they also know that they will be judged on it. So I guess, from that point of view, it does make sense that someone or some people, even as accomplished as them, would still experience imposter syndrome. And it also makes sense when the research then tells us that imposter syndrome is mostly experienced by high achieving people. So people who are smart and talented and hardworking, who've had great, maybe creative ideas, and contribute a lot to their organizations. And often it is experienced by people that you maybe never would suspect that, that person could possibly experience imposter syndrome. The ones who, maybe seem to have it all together, they're the ones that imposter syndrome is likely to strike with. But even though people who experience the imposter phenomenon are successful by outside standards, they don't truly own their success. So be aware of the language that people use. So yourself and other people, maybe your friends and colleagues. So for example, I used to run a lot of presentation skills courses in person, obviously. Those were the days. Um, and I would see that some people would be extremely nervous about presenting. And everybody would come. It was usually the second day whenever they would actually have to present something. And everybody that would come in would express that they're really nervous and everything. Some people maybe more than others. How they actually felt inside, I don't know. I just went by how they expressed themselves. But it was often very clear that people who did really, really good presentations were the ones that were saying that they were extremely nervous about it. So the two things, to a lot of the other people there didn't tally because they were saying, how could you be nervous about this when you've done such a brilliant presentation? But when you think about it in terms of that success and the lack of sort of ownership of the success, you know, people weren't putting it down to the right things. But as well as that, the language that other people were using in terms of how nervous they were, other people were dismissing because they just saw the actual behavior or the outcome and they didn't have any idea about what was going on in the person at all. So when you think about it in terms of how you behave, you might say to someone, I feel really nervous about this. I don't think that I can cope with this. If that person has seen you doing well in the past or, being able to cope with it, they're more likely to be dismissive of you saying that. And the same with you, with other people as well. So think about the language that people use because nobody's going to say, I feel really nervous about it if they're not. So don't be dismissive of that. Take it on board and try to be encouraging. And I suppose that would be exactly the same for you. Be aware of it, don't dismiss it, but try to sort of be positive, encouraging to yourself about it as well. I know that I personally, whenever I would be doing presentations, later on, will absolutely take on board how nervous people are, even if they are capable of doing really wonderful presentations. Okay, so moving on then, I
Ashley,
have,
before you
sorry,
do, we have a question here in the chat. I'm not sure if you want to address it now or wait to
I'll
later.
see, yeah.
Um, just in terms of the previous slide there, the individual's asking, does imposter syndrome include dwelling on a silly mistake they made some 20 years ago?
My heart goes out to you if that's the case. I guess it would because something like that is hard to put behind you. I suppose to some extent you have to think about, well, maybe not, but you will have made so many mistakes in the 20 years since that. So why was that particular one that was so, drastic, have such consequences for you? But yes, it would be because it compounds the feelings that you have around any mistake that you make now. And the thing, I suppose it's an odd thing to say, maybe you've got imposter syndrome if you're really worried about making mistakes. Um, but that's basically because obviously all of us will make mistakes, and to try and progress and to move on, we will make mistakes. Some companies actually give rewards for the biggest mistake because taking risks is how you move on. So being fearful of doing new things because you might make a mistake will inhibit you and will mean that you don't perhaps progress as well as you could do. So yeah, I mean, I couldn't say specifically if that incident from 20 years ago means that you have imposter syndrome, but certainly dwelling on mistakes is one of the things that could mean that you compound the feelings of imposter syndrome. Um, Good luck with getting rid of that one. Carmel, I don't know if you have any advice on that one either.
No,
Um,
I think you've said it all there, Ashley. Thank you.
okay. So, yeah, so consequences then. I've already touched on some of the consequences that might occur if you regularly experience imposter syndrome. But just to give you a clear picture of it, I thought I'd put some down in writing for you. You might find it difficult to assess your level of competence and skills. And I've said to you before, about you got to be aware of what your level of skill is or your level of achievement is. You can't just go by what the feelings are around it. You have to be able to say, yes, I'm ticking these boxes. I have achieved these things and I did it myself. Okay. Nobody else achieved those things for me. You may be very critical of yourself, and all of us are critical of ourselves at some time. So it's not a question of if you're critical of yourself, you have imposter syndrome. And, I suppose I have to say as well, I've said to you it's not an illness. It's probably something that most people, I didn't put up statistics, but it's usually more than 70% is what the research says of people will experience imposter syndrome at some time. If you experience it occasionally, it's not such a big deal. But if you experience it an awful lot and you're aware of the impact that it has on you, then it is a bigger deal. So whenever I say critical of yourself, yes, being critical now and again isn't a problem. Being very critical, being overly critical of yourself, then that does have consequences. Okay, so be careful about that one. Um, it might be that you experience high levels of anxiety because you're always worried that you're not good enough, and that again you're going to get caught out. You might struggle to speak up or to share your ideas, maybe to ask questions or to ask for help, and that's definitely going to inhibit you in terms of working with others and in achieving your success. It just makes life harder for you not to be able to speak up. And this one, in a way, sort of turns things on its head a little bit. Set overly challenging targets for yourself. We all want to have goals and targets, but they should be achievable. Okay. And as I said before, challenging yourself should be from a place of the success that you have achieved at the moment, as opposed to I'm not good enough. Okay, so having those overly challenging targets can actually be inhibiting for you. A feeling that you're not good enough and have to do much better in order to prove yourself could lead to burnout. So you just keep going, you know, worse and worse all the time until you possibly burn out of it. Out of. You might also have an overall lack of satisfaction, and that can come about because, you know, again, your level of understanding of your own performance. You don't necessarily say that you're doing well, that you're achieving things, that you're managing to do things. And it's very hard then if you're not getting that satisfaction to find motivation and joy in your work or in the things that you do.
Roisin, we have a few people in the chat just sharing their experience of
Oh,
imposter
great.
syndrome. So, some people talking about and not applying for companies that they've always dreamt of working with because they're
Mm,
feeling that they're going to be rejected if they don't have a good profile. Um, and, you know, struggling to update their CV because they can't find the right, language to demonstrate their skills and competencies and that sort of thing that's holding them back as well. Um,
okay.
Um, and they also, just one person's mentioning that maybe, you know, appearance. I feel that if they're not dressed well or looking well, that it might be difficult to speak up.
Okay. Funny, actually, in all of the sort of reading that I've done around this topic, I don't think appearance really came up very much. It was more about what was going on inside. But yes, I can understand that what you feel, how you look on the outside would have an impact on how you feel as well. Um, Thanks very much to all of you who did put that up in the chat there. I said to you earlier, I didn't want to ask questions because I know that they're quite personal things, but I'm
Mhm.
sure that everybody else here appreciated, what you put in there, and a lot of them will also be experiencing exactly the same sort of things. I would say that if you're struggling with finding words for your CV and everything, that making an appointment with a careers consultant would be a very good starting point. Um, because it's not about just finding the words to actually put on the CV, but then to be able to actually talk about them confidently in interview as well. And that's even harder to do because putting it in writing is one thing, but talking about it face to face is another thing. And some of that is just about someone else being able to say to you, no, absolutely put this down, and then just practice being able to talk about it. Because an awful lot of that um, dealing with the imposter syndrome thing is about you acknowledging it and putting it behind you and doing what you need to move on with it. So getting the help, getting the resources. When I say help there, I'm talking about things like getting a careers consultant to help you with that, um, putting together information that will help you to move on with things, practicing things, doing things a little bit out of your comfort zone and extending that and extending that. And also talking to your friends. But I'm just about to get into the how, the sort of things that you might do to help to overcome imposter syndrome. It's not something that you're ever going to just go, I used to have that, but I don't have that anymore. Right? It's not something that you're ever going to completely overcome. If that was the case, then you wouldn't have extremely rich and probably people with lots of therapists and all the rest of it saying that they still experience imposter syndrome. It's really just about managing and handling it. Okay, so let's move on then to the next slide. And as I said there, I would love to say that I do have a magic wand and could mysteriously banish all your feelings of imposter syndrome and indeed mine for when they occur. But of course, that is not the case. I would be a mega multimillionaire if that was the case. Um, you will notice that I put what changes would you make rather than could you make at the top of the slide there in terms of that questions. If you had a magic wand, what changes would you make to manage your imposter syndrome? And I have it there as would rather than could because it really does take action from your point to be able to manage that imposter syndrome. It's not something that, even if you're aware of it, you can just go, oh, yeah, I have that. Right. Okay. You then have to put in place some actions to help you managing it, help you manage it. Um, so, because if you want to work through the imposter syndrome experiences, then you have to be active about it and you have to put some effort into it. So, first up, then, you need to recognize and accept what is happening. You have to acknowledge your feelings in order to start to deal with them. You have to recognize the strain and the damage that the negative self image can have on your work, maybe on your studies and in your life in general if it's not addressed. So, accepting it, recognizing it and accepting it is an important first step. Second thing then is to challenge your negative thoughts and beliefs. And, it's sometimes useful to look at yourself from an outsider's perspective. For example, if a friend said to you that they didn't feel that they could live up to other people's expectations, what would you advise them? Would you just agree with them or would you, tell them that they were being too hard on themselves? So it's important to sort of treat yourself with the same kindness and compassion that you would offer others in the same position. But if somebody said that to you, what you'd also do is try to give them evidence that they are, that they are able to do these things, that they are achievers and that. So it's important for you to look for that as well. Share your feelings and talk about it. So when you start to talk about it, you realize that a lot of people are feeling the same thing. And I'm not sure how many people are in this group today, but chances are if you're here, then most of you have at least some feeling that you're suffering. See, I've said the word experiencing imposter syndrome. So, it's important to recognize that you may be experiencing it and also that other people are as well. But it's not something to necessarily just dwell on. It is about looking for those positive things that you can do about it. Okay. Um, so have a good support network, or maybe at least a friend or a colleague who you can talk to about your challenges without feeling judged about it. And remember what I said about being dismissive of people who are achievers and then say, oh, but I don't feel that I can do this, because other people will see that and be dismissive of it. So don't let people dismiss your feelings. If they dismiss your nerves or your lack of confidence, it's probably because they're only seeing that you are good at something and that they don't necessarily understand why you might be feeling like that, even if they're experiencing the same thing. So discuss it that bit further until they understand that, why you might actually be feeling like that. Um, and also sort of be looking at it in terms of, are they feeling it as well? You'll probably find that there's a lot of understanding around it whenever you actually get to use the terminology and to explain why you feel the way that you do. And it's really good to hear how other people have dealt with feeling like an imposter. And it's also, I suppose, a relief to know that you're not the only one and that other people are feeling it too. And as I said, I don't know how many's in the group today, but there was a big number that registered for today's session. So that then brings me to create a sense of belonging. Um, and part of the reason that we experience imposter syndrome is if we feel isolated or if we stand out. So cultivating a sense of community, or as folks say now, finding your tribe, is one way to help you create that confidence. So once you feel confident in one area, it can help you to feel confident in another. So for example, you might not feel confident about asking questions in your lecture. But perhaps if you were in a club or a society where you really felt at home, where you really felt that you belonged there, and you had other people that you mixed really well with, and you were able to confidently talk to them and ask questions and things like that, then that sort of feeling of belonging can help to increase your feeling of confidence when you're in the lecture situation. I'm not saying that it overcomes it, but being able to have that sense of belonging in one area helps you to have that sense of belonging in another, and sense of confidence in another. So try to create that sense of belonging by finding, whether it's a group of friends or a club or even just one other person where you really feel that you can be yourself and you can discuss these sort of things and really thrash out ideas and stuff like that. So being somewhere where you feel really accepted can help you feel that acceptance in other areas of your life. I'm not saying that it's necessarily easy to find somewhere where you feel that real sense of belonging, excuse me, but it is one of the things that will help you. Make a list of your achievements. And again, this comes back to your CV and that as well. We tend to focus on the negatives. So we have to be really focused on acknowledging and also for taking credit for the positives. So start by recording all of your achievements. So this is a task that, even if you don't go away and do the more touchy-feely type things that I'm suggesting, you could still go away, and probably you're all at a stage where you're putting together CVs and things like that as well. But it's not just about achievements in terms of your CV. it could be an achievement like I asked a question in class, or I spoke to someone for the first time. You're not necessarily going to put those things on your CV, but for you, they're an achievement, especially if it's something that you've overcome in order to be able to do that. But, you might want to include things like sporting achievements, music achievements. It might be things that you have certificates or awards for. It might be things that you don't. They don't have to be linked to anything else. Um, they don't have to be linked to the work that you do. So it doesn't have to have anything to do with what you're studying in university or anything. It's just a record of all of your achievements, and keep adding to it, because, once you get that list done, you'll start to think of other things as well. Maybe not things with certificates, but maybe things that you realize, yes, actually, I did that. It took a lot out of me to do that. I did it. I'm going to give myself credit for doing that. Um, and then what's important is that you acknowledge how you achieve those. And it won't be through luck. Okay. You didn't get your grade 5 piano exam because of luck. You got it because of hard work and dedication. The same thing for, if you finally put your hand up and asked a question in class and that was a tough thing for you, you didn't achieve that through luck. You achieved it through your determination and your willingness to overcome what might be holding you back. So it's important to record your achievements, but it's also probably more important to accept that there really were achievements and that you didn't get them just because of some luck or because of a fluke or because other people liked you or something like that. Okay. And it's good to have that sort of tangible list as a positive sort of reinforcement whenever you are feeling like a fraud, whenever you are thinking, should I really go for this position? Um, do I really have what it takes to go for it? If you've got your list of accomplishments and achievements there, and as I say, the soft stuff as well as the certificates, then it's a good sort of tangible thing to encourage you and to reinforce that for you. Collect positive feedback. And there is, I'm sort of saying that because whenever I say to people about, make a list of your achievements, you're automatically going to go towards the things that you're going to put onto your CV. And that you've got your certificates for and all of that kind of thing. But collecting positive feedback's a different sort of achievements too. So as well as achievements, it's important to also recognize all those other sort of acknowledgements and feedback from other people. Do not dismiss positive feedback and just concentrate on the negative, because that's what we tend to do. We hear the negative and somebody, gives you some sort of positive feedback, and a couple of days later, it doesn't resonate with you anymore. You've forgotten about it. You just hear the negative. Like one of the folks here, their mistake from 20 years ago. There's been a lot of positive feedback, I'm sure, in the 20 years in between, and that's what you want to focus on. So don't dismiss the positive feedback and just concentrate on the negative. It might be a compliment from a colleague, a customer, or a friend, someone saying how well you've done something. But it's important that you recognize that, your ongoing achievements, and give yourself some positive feedback as well. Something good that you recognize that you did. A goal maybe that you met, could be a personal challenge, could be a work challenge, a challenge that you faced that you found a way through. Things like that. I mean, it's really important to learn to accept compliments. And then whenever you need a boost, take a look at wherever you hold it, your journal, and see the proof of your successes. People who are very aware of and comfortable with their values are more confident. And I would have liked to have spent a bit more time to be able to discuss values with you. But if you Google, you'll get a list of values, and it's really good to look at, right, what are my top 5 values? So be clear about what's important to you, and then focus on what's important to you, rather than comparing yourself to other people, because I think that comparison of you to other people can be a quite negative thing, especially if it's someone who is quite expressive, and stuff. So be clear about what your values are, what's important to you, and, compare how you behave, compare what you want from life with what your values are. So have a clear picture of what success means to you and what's meaningful to you, and it won't be the same for all of you. And the final one there, rewrite your mental script. And again, that's basically about that negative language. So I said to you about Dr. Valerie Young, who's the foremost sort of person on imposter syndrome. And she says that if you want to stop feeling like an imposter, then you have to stop thinking like an imposter. So you need to reframe things so that you look at things more positively. Use different phrases like, I can handle this, I've got this. You see those things on posters all the time. When a negative thought pops into your head, and they will, that's maybe something that's going to stop you from, grasping that opportunity. Ask yourself, where has that thought come from? Tell yourself that you just have to take it one small step at a time and work out what the next small step is. So for someone who's worried about applying for a job that they maybe don't feel capable of, there are a lot of steps to you actually getting that job. One of them is actually, getting all your ducks in order in terms of getting your CV or your application and things like that ready, doing your preparation for interview, and then, getting shortlisted, getting the interview, doing any assessment tests that need to be done. But each one of those things are small steps, and you just take it as it comes. You don't necessarily go from now to me having got the job. Okay? So tell yourself that you have to take it one small step at a time and work out what the next small step is that you need to take. So I said that I didn't have a magic wand, and I certainly don't. And that it was about being active in terms of changing your thinking and becoming more confident. Imposter syndrome isn't an illness, and I know I slipped and almost called it that earlier. So there isn't a cure for it. You just have to actively work through the experience of it. Carmel, was there anything else came in there that I might need to address?
No, just a few comments saying, thanks for the practical advice, and that they thought that the idea of keeping a list of personal, small and personal achievements was a good idea and something they hadn't thought about before, but will do going forward.
Good. Because I really do think, there's a big difference between what you put on your CV and other achievements. And I think it's really important for you to recognize those as well. Anybody who has any other comments or any ideas, anything that might have worked for them, or again, any other questions or anything, feel free to pop them into the chat, because we can certainly all learn from each other as well, especially if you're someone that feels that, you have been dealing with imposter syndrome. Maybe you have some techniques for getting you on to the next step as well. So, I think a really useful question to ask yourself is, what would you do if fear were not a factor? So for example, if you saw a job that you think you would love, you on the website or in whatever sort of on My Future, whatever, you see a job come up and you think, wow, I would absolutely love that. Okay. So what might hold you back from going for it? Would it be actual reasons in terms of that you don't have the qualifications that they're asking for? Or might it be that actually you've got quite a few of the things that they're asking for? Maybe not everything, but quite a few of the things. But what might hold you back is just that fear factor. And if you can recognize that those two things are different, that it is fear holding you back and not actual genuine reasons. Of course, I'm not trying to dismiss fear as a reason, but if you can I suppose, make that partition between what's holding me back in terms of fear and what's the actual reality here. What have I got going for me? Then you might make a different decision based on it. If you can say to yourself, you know what, if I wasn't fearful of this, I would absolutely go for it, then maybe that will encourage you to go for it in the future and take that just the next step and then the next one. So, in terms of making decisions, what other decisions have you made based on fear? If you think about that in your past, what decisions have you made based on fear? Maybe unjustified fear rather than on what the actual reality was. Okay. How has that fear held you back? How how will you stop it holding you back in the future? Because that's really the important bit. If you can recognize that feeling fear has held you back in the past, then how can you stop that fear from holding you back in the future? And one of the things is certainly recognizing that that's actually what it is. It's just fear, and still taking those next steps to keep going and keep going. And I love this picture by Sylvia Duckworth about how people view success. And people generally see the achievement itself, but not all of the other things that have gone into making that achievement. So when you see other people's successes, you're not necessarily aware of the hours of work, possible sleepless nights, mistakes, and failures that went into making that success. When you view someone as successful, you have to also acknowledge what all went into making that success. And I think that we don't tend to necessarily do that for other people. We might see it, we certainly recognize our failures and the hard work that we put in and our disappointments and things, but we don't know and we don't recognize that for other people. So I think that that's important as well. So likewise for yourself, when you're looking at your achievements, don't dismiss it as luck. Look at all the effort as well as the disappointments, the sacrifices, the dedication that went into the success, and celebrate and acknowledge it. Remember it for the next time. Success is not just given to you, it comes with all of those other things as well. And one of the ways that Dr. Valerie Young suggests in dealing with the urge for perfectionism is to see yourself as a work in progress. None of us are fully formed, no matter what our age, even me at my ripe old age, or how much experience that we have. We're always learning. And maybe that's a good phrase to keep in mind. I'm a work in progress. And finally, now you can see that I have put a lot of effort into this slide. It's not acknowledging my wonderful artistic skills, this one, I think. So I think that when you have identified that you are experiencing imposter syndrome and you can give it that name, so I talked earlier about putting that label on it, it's easier to tell yourself to deal with it. So you can say, you know what, that is just my little imposter talking. I'm going to acknowledge that it is there and I'm going to ignore it and own this. You can even physically wipe it off your shoulder if that helps you, if you want to. So before you turn down that opportunity to tell yourself you don't deserve something, give your little imposter a good talking to. I'm sure that there's a market for imposter dolls out there if anybody wants to be entrepreneurial around that one. I haven't seen any of them yet. Okay, folks, now would probably be a good time because I'm finished on this subject. So if anybody has any questions that they want to ask on that before I move on to interviews.
Rushing, just in regards to how to deal with imposter syndrome, someone has just made a comment here that, it has helped them to start looking at being lucky and being liked by others as a positive thing as opposed to a negative thing. Because it takes a lot of skill to capitalize on opportunities and good deeds, I suppose, to be liked by others.
Okay.
So that was just a helpful hint to, I suppose, turn a negative into a positive.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Keep sending in more of your comments, folks, if you have those. And thanks very much to those of you who have put in comments. It's great to hear. Okay, I'm going to move on to interview preparation now, but happy to just still take questions and put comments in as you want to. So I always start with reminding you of the STAR technique for effectively answering interview questions. If you've heard this from me before, apologies, but I always put it into these. It's very useful to know this. Basically, you want to be able to tell the interviewer your story by putting your answer into context for them. Remember that an interviewer might have, heard from 20 people, the same answers or the same questions all along. So you've got to be able to put it into a nice, easy way for them to take the information on board. So when you're formulating an answer for your interview, try and follow the STAR technique that you see here. It makes your answers clear and logical, and it means that you're getting across the main points that you need to. So start by listening to the question. Think of the example that you're going to use, and hopefully you will have prepared those answers or similar ones ahead of time. But even if it's not something you've prepared, even if you're having to think on your feet for it, frame your answer into situation, task, action, and results. Describe the event or the situation that you were in. Explain the task that you had to complete. What were the challenges? Describe the specific actions that you personally took to complete the task. You can say, I know a lot of you will use team references. You can say what you did as a team, but you should also say what you personally did because you're the person being interviewed. And then finish with the results. What was the results of your actions? Were there any benefits? Was there savings, maybe cost savings, time savings, a happy customer? What was the impact? Okay, and also just to let you know, one of the things that we have available to you is practice interviews online. The program that we use is called Shortlist Me, and Carmel will put the link into the chat, but you can find it on the careers website as well. The package provides interviews for specific companies. So, for example, Virgin Media, AstraZeneca, and the NHS. But it also provides a chance to interview for roles in law, banking, engineering, etc. So particular companies, but also particular roles. So there's a broad range of opportunities for you to practice your interviews. And once you register for it, you are in control of the interview practice, but you only have 3 days to complete the interview. So register for it, decide on a time that suits you, and then do that within 3 days. Now, you're not interacting with any real life people, and that's what makes it very good in terms of just being able to practice, okay? Because there's nothing to be nervous about this. You're not interacting with people. It's purely a software package. So nothing to be wary of. You'll be responding to pre-recorded questions as if it was an online interview. You get some time to prepare your answer. I don't know, 20, 30 seconds or something like that, maybe, to prepare your answer. And then you give your answer. It's about 5 or 6 questions each interview. And the important thing is that you get some feedback on how you did. Now, again, this is automated feedback, so you're not interacting with anyone. But it is a really good interactive quality experience. So I think, Carmel, you maybe did put that link in there already.
Yeah, I just put the link up there, Rashi.
Lovely.
And we have another tip here from
Good.
another participant, and I would actually echo this as well. So the individual has just said that a tip for applying for jobs, just go for it. If you meet the essential criteria, just go for it. What's the worst that can happen? You get good experience completing an application form, doing the interview process. And don't worry if you're not good enough or whether you can do the job or not until you're offered it. And then if you are offered it, then they wouldn't have offered you the job unless they thought you were capable of it. So very good piece of advice.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. And it is that thing again about just taking it one step at a time. And I think what you said, I'm sorry, I don't know who said it, but I think what you said about, it is up to the interviewers, up to the assessment panel to decide whether you're capable of the job or not. And unless you go in there and tell them all the lies of the day, then what you're saying to them is what they're basing their opinion on. So if they're giving you the job, yes, we all have to constantly do well in our job, but get there and then just prove yourself within the job. Um, if someone else doesn't get the job over you, gets the job over you, maybe you were still very deserving of it and someone else had an edge on you. But what are you going to lose? Yes, it's nerve-wracking, but it is for everyone, whether you have whether you experience imposter syndrome or not. Everyone experiences nerves with interviews. Um, but a lot of people get put off by doing the actual applications and stuff as well. And that's not something that you need to be nervous about because that's really just, on paper. You can do all of that without anyone else being involved. So just think of it as one step at a time and it's up to them. And I think that's really good advice. And as you say, Carmel, you would echo that as well.
Yeah, just a few comments coming here, rushing to say thank you for your very practical advice, and just confirming what Laura had said as well about to go for it and see what happens.
I really do hope
use it as a learning experience, I suppose.
Absolutely. I really do hope that it makes a difference to some of you that are here today, that you will go for some things that you might have been reluctant to go for, So, yeah, and if you do, even if you don't get it, put it down as an achievement because it was still something that you went for that you might not have done. So, yeah, get those list of things that you're going to achieve and then tick them off one at a time as well. Okay, so I'm just going to move on to sample questions that you might get at interview. Now, as I said to you, they're not going to ask you about imposter syndrome. It would be highly unlikely that they did. Carmel, you can tell me different if that's the case, but I'm not aware of any questions on imposter syndrome as such. But certainly there is about confidence. So you're more likely to be expected to demonstrate confidence at an interview than be asked specifically about it. But there are a number of questions that you might want to prepare for, especially if you're someone that feels that you are lacking in self-confidence, being able to talk about it. I mean, that is one thing about interviews. The more prepared that you are for them, the less likely you are going to be caught out by not being able to answer a question or just to feel that lack of confidence anyway and going for it. So preparation is part of the thing to stop you feeling unconfident. So let me see. So how would you define confidence? How would you define self-confidence? Tell me about a situation or situations that might demonstrate your confidence to do this job. Would your friends describe you as a confident person? That's quite a closed question, so you would want to open up that answer and not just answer yes or indeed no. Um, do you think there is a difference between confidence and arrogance? And actually, I think that that's important. I don't think it's not necessarily something that you're going to get asked at an interview, but I think it's something for you to think about because some people don't like to appear confident because they feel it can come across as arrogant. So, get right in your head what you think the difference between those two things are, and that might help you be able to demonstrate your confidence. How confident are you that you can successfully perform the duties of this position and why? And similarly, why do you think you will be good at this job? That's definitely a question that you might get asked. So those are two questions that might not actually mention confidence, but you will be expected to demonstrate your confidence to be able to do the job. And I suppose that is one thing that whenever we talk about nerves and stuff, I would tend to be ultra honest at interviews. And if somebody said to me, "Are you the best person for the job?" I'd probably think, "Yeah, probably not. Actually, it's probably other people much better at it." So I try to rein that bit in. Um, but you do want to be able to demonstrate in the interview that you are confident enough to be able to do the job. So I suppose that is one thing about taking those steps, that throughout that, you have to also appear confident. and that requires practice. And that'll require the preparation beforehand as well. Confidence comes from feelings of well-being and belief in your own ability and your own skills and experience. So some of those things that we talked about recording those achievements, recording those sort of positive feedback, and acknowledging that they were due to you. I think that's the important thing, is very important. So being able to talk about your abilities, your skills, and your experience is a good way of demonstrating your confidence. So that's the questions then. A few reminders, because I know I've gone over my time then. So we will, if Carmel hasn't already, we will put the slides into the chat. There will also be the feedback form, which, I would encourage you to fill in. And as I say, if you're happy for it not to be anonymous, then we will put your feedback form into the draw for a £25 shopping voucher. And some other sessions that are coming up, folks. So today's session is there in green, and we've got a few more coming up: effective communication skills, leadership skills, influencing and negotiating skills, active resilience, talking about global leadership, learning agility, and working with customers and clients. And then we've got a couple more coming up during development weeks, which is 23rd of May to the 2nd of June. There are lots of other things on the events page on the careers website. Those are just the sessions that I'll be running myself, but there's lots of other things on the website there as well. So do check that out for anything else. And once again, any questions, and I'm just going to stop recording now as well.